everyone, I'm Cole from the Kingdom, and today we're talking about the theme of identity in Dragon Age the Veilguard. I didn't notice it right away, but basically all of our companions struggle with their own identity, and it becomes the crux of their respective personal conflicts, external and internal. The most obvious example of this is probably Tosh. I'm not going to talk about the dialogue writing here. If people want, I'll make another video specifically for Tosh. For now, let's just say I don't care. I really don't. They're non-binary, good for them. I'm glad they can start feeling more comfortable in their own skin. Doesn't affect me. I will respect their pronouns regardless of whether or not I understand how they feel, because that is the decent thing to do. I like them as a person. I completely don't care about their gender identity. Good for them. Moving on. What's more important than that, for me, is whether they embrace their Qunari heritage or Rivaini culture. I always endorse Rivain because I've played Dragon Age before and I know what the Qun is, but I just say that because it's funny. I've seen what happens if you encourage them to go more with the Qun, and I like it. They come to want to make the Qun better, more like what it's supposed to be. Now, Rook didn't know what it was supposed to be until after the choice has been made, but I still like it. They resolve to try to get the Antom back to the Qun. The Antom are a good topic for their own video. The next big example that comes to mind is Lucanus. After being kidnapped and possessed, he throws himself into his work. He's an assassin, and specifically a mage killer. This is his job, it's all he thinks he is. Kind of reminds me of the Qun now that I think of it. But with spite in his head, he's distracted. Spite reminds him of everything that has gone wrong. His kidnapping, torture, Katarina, the Antom, the Venatori. Spite is a constant reminder of all of that. And Lucanus, well, he thinks there's only one thing to do. Be the assassin he is. Solve his problems with the blade. But of course that doesn't work. He misses his shot at Gillinan. He hits her, makes her bleed, which is a damn impressive feat. But all he can see is his failure. He's never missed like that before. It's easy to blame Spite, but the reality is that it's all those other things that have gone wrong, the doubts eating away at him. Spite is just a symptom of the deeper problem, his internal struggle with who he is, and facing problems he can't just kill. Even when it comes to being the first Talon, he steps up when the time comes, but if you read his Tevinter Knight story, you know he would have happily let Ilario take the job, if Ilario hadn't gone nuts. But the resolution is finding common ground with Spite, which really feels like a metaphor for coming to terms with his trauma and letting himself heal. And now let's talk about Davern. Davern grew up Dalish, never really feeling like he fit. He was a great hunter, he left to hunt monsters and joined the Grey Wardens because he needed to fight for a cause. That's a great character arc right there. But then Asan comes into the picture. He starts as a bodyguard for the Griffins, but after the Gloomhowler attack, he's responsible for all the Griffins in Thedas. And Asan specifically chooses him. Davern now has to learn how to go from monster hunter to Griffin parent. He has to figure out how to teach Asan, and it's adorable, engaging, endearing. This is a beautiful arc. But it goes beyond that. After Weishaupt, hundreds of his friends die, and he gets the kill on the Archdemon only to be robbed of what he thought would be his heroic sacrifice. Now he doesn't know where he fits in the world. Asan keeps him grounded, gives him new purpose. Before, he thought his identity was just a monster hunter, a Grey Warden. In war, victory. In peace, vigilance. In death, sacrifice. That's all he wanted and all he needed. But destiny's a funny thing, and he got a baby griffin dropped in his lap, and he found comrades in the Veilguard. And depending on choices, well, I don't want to talk about that. By the way, I can make dedicated videos covering each of these characters, their arcs, and the good writing to be found in this game. But I personally can't stand when some YouTubers make their point and then keep going long past that, or worse, when they take 20 minutes just to get to the point. So I don't want to waste anyone's time. So Balara. Her struggle with identity may not be so obvious at first glance. She's an interesting character, I like her a lot. But somehow she does seem overshadowed by most of the others. And I don't know if that's on purpose, but I think it works to her benefit in a strange way. There's a few conversations with Rook and other companions where it becomes clear she sees the amazing qualities in others, but doesn't think her own are anything special. Rook is a hero, Nev is a master detective, and so on. She barely sees her own value and needs to be reminded of it. I can see that becoming annoying for some characters with weaker writing, but I think it works for her. I see a lot of myself in how she feels. I think we all feel this way sometimes. For her actual arc, she's praised for being an expert on ancient elven magic, and is a great veil jumper, but in the first real outing with her, you find the doubts and fears she faces. She's demanding of herself and others since the apparent death of her brother. She talks about what he wanted, and how she feels she has to carry on for him, or else she'll be letting him down. And then he comes back and throws her for a loop in all sorts of ways. Can she trust her brother? Is he still her brother? Can she trust her own heart? The identity angle kind of fits for both of them, as he struggles to reconcile his feelings about Inaris with his trust for Balara, in the end, relying on her heart, just like he wanted her to do. And then there's the dilemma with her people. It probably should have been a bigger deal, probably another victim of the rough dev cycle, but there's a few times she talks about the modern elves in this changing world. Her gods turned out to be evil. What do they do now? Who are they? Should they even try to hold on to the past when so much of it is quite literally tainted? And she finds herself at a critical point with the Nada Sterthalan. So her struggle with identity comes down to what is her value, why does she keep going, and what is the place of the Dalish in this changing world? And then there's Nev, master detective, and, well, that's how she defines herself. But then the Venatori and Aelia threaten her home, and the people she personally knows. Her struggle is in becoming a protector and what that means. If she's hardened, she resolves to use any means necessary and doesn't care how she's perceived. If she's not hardened, she's a little more, open to possibilities. I think that's healthier, but I'm not saving Minrathous. There's a few possibilities with how she accomplishes it, but she always finds herself in the role of Docktown's protector, which is not where she expected, but it works out. And Lace Harding. This one is weird. There's kinda two sides to it. On the one hand, she's an Inquisition scout who joined Varric and now is with the Veilguard taking on the most powerful entities in Thedas on the front lines. So we get this in over her head kinda deal. And then they thrust Titan powers on her, and now she has to figure out what they are, how they work, and learn more about the Titans. So, a different in over her head kinda deal. And this connection with the Titans causes an internal struggle where she's not sure who she is anymore. And the Titans as a concept are so much bigger than her. She doesn't know where she fits in or what she's meant to do with this power and information. I like where she ends up, where she says the age of the Titans is over and the dwarves have become something new. That's if you encourage compassion over rage. Part of the reason I like this is because I didn't care for the Titans anyway, and it felt weird since we were thousands of years removed from anyone in Thedas even knowing about them, so there's hardly a personal connection. Yeah, I love Lace with all my heart, and I love the dwarves too, but I am not a fan of this plot point. So lastly for the companions, there is Emeric. His struggle comes down to a crippling fear of death. He wants to be an immortal lich, but it means facing that fear. At that same time, he loves Manfred like a son. He found a baby wisp, built him a body from donors, and has been raising him as he slowly learns. Manfred finally speaks on his own, showcasing how much he has learned, and then sacrifices himself for Emeric. Now Emeric is faced with a choice. Honor Manfred's sacrifice, let him rest in peace, and achieve his lifelong dream and help countless people moving forward? Or does he bring Manfred back? He calls it weakness, not being able to accept death. I can see both sides of the argument. What would Manfred have wanted? He knew he was going to his death when he did that, and he did it anyway. However, if you think about it, that's exactly the situation Emeric finds himself in now. In bringing Manfred back, Emeric faces death. Years away, probably, but he's giving up immortality for what is basically his adopted son. I've done both, and I don't think there is a right answer, which is exactly the kind of moral dilemma I love. But really, the struggle is between Emeric's identity as a Mournwatcher, a protector, and his identity as a father, whose son will grow, learn, and outlive him. likely going on to do great things of his own. And lastly, let's talk about Rook. Yeah, maybe Rook's dialogue options weren't as varied as previous protagonists, and maybe the player doesn't have as much agency as maybe they should have had. I don't know. I don't judge the developers on that, but the Veilguard's main music track is called Not the Chosen One. Dude, that hits. I mean, the music in the Veilguard is great in general, but that title, that really shows what Rook is meant to be as a character. Some random person completely unprepared for this fight, who is forced to become its leader not because they're the chosen one, but because they're the only one. You can criticize the writing all you want, but I adore that motif. So that'll do it. That's how each of the main cast struggles with a consistent theme of identity in the Veilguard, and I doubt that was an accident. Other BioWare companions have dealt with that, but Veilguard is unique in that all of its main characters struggle with identity in different ways. So that's it for now, my friends. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to comment and like, and remember to la nadas.